Hi, and welcome to Lights of the Round Table. My name's Susanna, and I hope you watch our first mini-series episode last week because we were talking about tokenizations and CBDCs. And it's imperative that you see this because our guest today is none other than Fabio Araujo. He is an economist and engineer, and he's heading the CBDCs program out in Brazil. So it's an honor to have you. Fabio, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Susanna. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss this topic. It's very important for the Central Bank of Brazil and for all the central banks around the globe. I'm sure that there are lots of interesting things for us to discuss today. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I mean, yes, I think that the CBDCs program started back some time ago and it's ramping. And anyways, before we start talking about the project that you are actually coordinating at Banco de Brazil, let's start with your background. I find it fascinating, and I think the infusion of your skills makes you the perfect person to be coordinating this project.
Okay, thank you, Susanna. I I have an undergrad in electrical engineering. I have studied telecommunications, and I have actually a master in telecommunications also. That was before I entered the Central Bank of Brazil back in 1998. I've been working at the Central Bank since last century. And then I have seen a lot of things there. I helped to implement the inflation targeting regime in 1999 in Brazil. I was involved with developing the system for forecasting inflation, and I took care of that for a long period in the bank. After I joined the Central Bank of Brazil, I decided it was important to study economics. Then I became a PhD in economics, and I was focused in two subjects. One was um, econometrics, that today people would say data science, and also monetary economics. Those were the two subjects that I deepened my studies in the PhD. And as I said, I worked for several years with inflation and forecasting inflation. And after a PhD, I thought that it was not enough because it's very important. I was helping to run the forecast for the monetary policy, but there are many other things in the central bank. The central bank is a entire world. Then I decided to take a leave of the central bank and to work in the Congress for a while, where I had the opportunity to deal with regulation and with the with looking for agreements to make that the laws were feasible and to bring theoretical systems to the life of people. It was a very interesting time there compared to what I had before. I had a team of PhDs and masters working with me in forecasting. There in the Congress, you meet all kinds of people from all the areas and regions of the country, several different backgrounds. That was very enriching to deal with them. Then after a while, I came back to the central bank. I was head of the economic advisors to the governor for 4 years. And after those 4 years, I decided that I should join the innovation area of the bank. Then I went on to start in 2020 a project in natural language processing.
Mm.
I think that that's a very important discussion for everybody, but for the Central Bank of Brazil, it's a very important topic. But after a while, the governor called me and said, "Oh, I need the skills of a macroeconomist that understands innovation, and I think that you should be the person in charge of the digital currency project that we are starting. Then late 2020, I started to on the project, and at the beginning of 2021, I became the leader of the project.
Wow, that's very commendable. So you have engineering background, economics background, AI?
Yeah, I have studied a little of AI, but it was back in the 90s.
Yeah,
The deep learning algorithms had not been developed yet. I have studied a little, but it's more like keeping up with the work of others
right,
than developing things by myself.
right. And so now you have governance. So explain to us, go back to a little bit to the history, CBDCs. Why CBDCs in Brazil? How did that project started?
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing. We are at the Central Bank of Brazil. We are always looking into the technologies that can be applied in the market, so we can configure how to improve the relations in the financial market in Brazil. And one of the goals that we have been pursuing for a while is to increase the efficiency for access of financial services in the market. That's a struggle, more than a decade-long struggle that we've been having at the central bank. And when we started studying CBDCs, we we had the regular approach that other central banks have. This is currency. This is just a new way of issuing currency and make it available for the population. Then it's very good for payments, and we started from that perspective. But when we finished the first study focused on the perspective of issuing a CBDC, it was very clear for us that the systems that we had in Brazil already running, like our RTGS, real-time gross settlement systems, and the instant payment system, PIX, they they were able to deal with all the problems that we had in payments. Then we had the opportunity and the challenge to look into the technology to see what else this technology could bring to the Brazilian market. And we were already developing and rolling out an open finance initiative to try to make the financial system more interoperable and to ease the transfer of information among market participants. And when we saw the developments that were happening at the DeFi landscape in the beginning of 2021, we noticed that it was very in line with what we wanted to do in our financial ecosystem. Not that everybody is able to run their own contracts, but in the sense that you can bring lots of different people, startups and fintech to provide new services and to compose services without the need of pre-agreement with other market participants. Because today, to achieve atomicity, you between different services, you need to get the providers together to agree to make it atomic, and with composability as there is in the EVM space, we don't need that. That would be we thought that it would be very good for startups, for market entrants. So we decided that we should try this technology and to see what the market would like to make out of this technology.
Now, is that okay? Is that the Stellar project? Is that the invitation to the cross-border payments systems rails that Stellar was using? Is that when that partnership flourished, or was this before? Because I think that your system is on the Ethereum based, because,
Yeah,
and so Stellar. So I just wanted to clarify
yeah.
a little bit with that. Yes.
Yeah, what happened is that back in 2021, we decided that programmability and composability were features that we wanted to bring into the financial sector to facilitate the entry of new market participants and the provision of services. And then we, at the end of the year, we made a call for projects, and it was a very open call. We had the idea that this technology was useful, but it was clear for us that the central bank shouldn't be the one providing the services in the space. We should have the governance, maybe the platform. We should provide the platform, but not the final services. The financial market should provide the final service. Otherwise, we would curb innovation instead of fostering innovation. And then we made this call. We received more than 40 proposals for use cases of CBDC. The questions that we made is how could we use the protocols that exist in the digital asset space, in DeFi space, crypto space? How could use those protocols to enhance the products that exist in the financial market, or to create new products that would enhance the welfare of the population? Then we selected 9 use cases, and just making a parenthesis, it was very interesting because several bodies that were interested in taking part in the lab, they would enter in touch with us and to ask which platform, which technology are you going to use? And my answer to them was that's up to you. You tell me which platform is good for your use case, because we want to see what are the use cases that are feasible and what are the features of each platform that allow that use case to be feasible. Then we had one use case based on Stellar. We had, I think, 2 or 3 use cases based on EVM. We had 2 or 3 based on Corda, 1 based on Canton by Digital Assets, and 2 other proprietary solutions that are not open source. And it was very interesting. We've learned a lot with these 9 projects that we selected. One thing that we learned there is that there is a lot of interesting things to be done with digital assets that could improve the efficiency of the market. That was one question that most central bankers were still asking themselves, and we wanted to make sure that our hunch was not just an impression, but that would bring more efficiency to the market. And that was something that we learned. Another thing that we learned is that for none of the projects that we tracked the progress, none of them needed a retail CBDC. We needed a CBDC that was able to make the system stable, and we needed a digital currency that was very well regulated. Then the problem with stable coins is that they are not that well regulated. What they have to back them, it's not very clear in several cases. Right. Then when you make an arrangement with a CBDC in the background, you don't put the central bank in the center stage. The market continue in the center stage, providing liquidity and innovation. And the central bank does what it best in doing, is providing safety and stability to the system. And that's what we want to do in this platform. In DREX, we have the CBDC to regulate the liquidity in the market, and we promote the platform so people can use the technology to access the services. Then that was when we met Stellar, and we had a very interesting project with Stellar. The project was how to use that platform to access services in public spaces. How could we bridge with public spaces for trading with crypto and other assets that could be there. We understand that we cannot grab the entire world. We have the platform for providing some services, but it will always be the case that some assets or some services are not provided in the DREX platform, then we need to bridge with public spaces or other permission spaces to make use of those services.
So where are you right now then? This was back in 2022. Where is the project at this point? Because I think there was some anticipation that the digital real was going to happen, or it was going to be tested, piloted at some point this year, March, May.
Yeah.
That went out, and so we're still anticipating.
Right. Actually, we are piloting, but only among banks and non-bank institutions, market participants in general. Let me explain. That has to do with the other lesson that we learned in the challenge. When we were finishing the project, we thought, okay, we have several different use cases that are interesting. Then we need to think about how to interoperate these use cases, because interoperability and composability is something that brings a lot of gains that can be reached using digital asset technology. Then we would notice that we were not able to comply with the Brazilian law for individual data privacy. Then instead of moving forward to a pilot where we could have the population, we needed to create an intermediate step for testing privacy solutions. Then we started to run a pilot in March of 2023. And in that pilot, instead of having lots of different use cases in separate ecosystem as we have done in 2022, we decided to bring different participants in one ecosystem to test privacy solutions based on one single use case. That single use case is quite technical. It's a peer-to-peer DVP of treasury bond between market participants that are not linked to the same financial institution. Suppose I'm a client of Bank A and I have a treasury bond in my wallet. You are a client of Bank B and you have money in your wallet, and we agree that I would like to sell it to you. It should be as simple as a money transfer. That's what we wanted to do. And we designed this use case because you need to exchange information among all the participants, and we need to check the compliance of bank privacy, the data protection, and commercial privacy. The three most important aspects of privacy are tested on this use case. And then we started to adapt ZKP solutions to implement in the pilot. We selected three solutions at the beginning of the period. One was anonymous Zither. It was the easiest one to adapt to the system. The second easiest one was Starlight by UI. And the third one was Rails by Paving, is a Brazilian startup. And apart from that, we have a relation with Microsoft, and they proposed to study an open source solution for the environment. And we said if they wanted to do that, not on the pilot, but on separate, and they had a solution developed there, they could bring to try on the pilot. And they managed to do it. They launched the ZKP Nova, and we have started the internal test at the central bank, and we are going to open it up for for the participants in the pilot test. Then we should finish the test. It was supposed to finish by May, but we are trying to finish by the end of August because of this delays in the adaptation of the security solutions for the Brazilian case, that with all the regulated needs for the protection of data privacy, individual privacy.
Yeah. So has governance, since you have practice in governance, you were in the government, has the governance part been difficult to pass along in your country concerning crypto and concerning CBDCs?
Right. That's another thing that is very interesting. We have been discussing the needs to change in the law for a CBDC, and we got to the conclusion that for issuing a retail CBDC, where the central bank would put their liabilities on the hands of the final customer, we would need to change the law. And the Congress is quite in line with our work, but we for the architecture that we picked, where the CBDC is used for the settlement among market participants, banks and non-bank PSPs, and the final customer uses let's call it a regulated stablecoin. For that scenario, we are good with the legal framework that we have today. We just need to make regulatory adjustments in the market here in Brazil. That's all we need. It's very. We are trying to develop a system that gives flexibility, but where we can use most of the regulatory framework that we have already, because it's very hard to design a system that needs an entirely new regulatory framework. You cannot jump from one system to another. You need to establish a path for reaching that new equilibrium, right? And that's what we are trying to do. Some people say the Central Bank of Brazil is too innovative, and what our approach is, we think that innovation is good for the population. There are advantages of implementing innovation. The problem is when the regulator turns their backs on the innovation and pretend that it not exists. Then it's very bad for the population, because the market starts to move without coordination, and lots of things get broke into during that period, and to get it fixed afterwards, it's a lot of work. Then as innovation is coming, there is no alternative to that. The best thing to do is to try to coordinate the market so we can have an orderly transition from the equilibrium and the arrangements that we have today to the future of the market.
Yeah, it's interesting what you just mentioned, how things have to be, I guess you have to test it. You have to make sure that you have that infrastructure and that architecture within. But I'm thinking about holistically speaking, about Brazil. I mean, here's a population. I can see a lot of pockets where you don't even have digitalization providers available for those underbanked and unbanked population, which I understand that's part of the goal anyways, to reach everybody, to be able to give them those services, right? And so I'm sure that there's a lot of those kind of challenges within the government, I guess, within the infrastructure, of making sure that every household has at least the basic needs in order to have that sort of communications and be able to use that little phone and be able to just have those seamless transactions that is supposed to happen. So where is that in Brazil? We'll move forward later with BRICS, but where is Brazil as far as its development? Give me that 40,000 foot view.
Yeah, actually, we have made a lot of effort in bankerizing the population since 2005. At least 2005, we made a lot of effort in doing that. Then before PIX, we had already about 80% of the adult population in Brazil, they have access to a bank account or a payments account. The payments account in Brazil were made very easy for the population to access. Then we try to simplify because they don't bring a lot of risk for the market, and they, on the other hand, they bring a lot of benefits to the population. Then before PIX, we had 80% of the population had some access to a bank account or a payments account. The problem was that the payment accounts were very easy to get, but they were not very interoperable with the systems because the large banks didn't want to connect with them. And PIX solved that. We provided a single rail where all the large banks were forced to connect. The five largest banks in Brazil were forced to join the network, and the other banks were allowed to join the network. Then all of the non-bank PSPs entered in the market, and all of a sudden it was very useful to have a payments account here in Brazil. Then before PIX, we had the people had the habit of withdrawing cash and making the payments in cash along the month or a couple of weeks because it was more convenient. But when PIX became available, people noticed that was not the case anymore. And now 90% of the Brazilian population, the adult Brazilian population, is using PIX. Then I know that there is the 10% of the Brazilian population, and that 10% is mostly in the areas where we do not have a lot of internet coverage. It's hard to have coverage there, and there we need to think about other solutions to make sure that this population have access to the services. But we have made a lot of progress with that. And if you have a smartphone and a service that is useful for the population, the Brazilian population will make use of that. We will learn that with PIX and with other apps that are very successful here in Brazil because they are very useful.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, as far as the DREX project is concerned, where is it now and what challenges do you see in the coming year?
The projects that I see coming in the coming year, well, I think that open finance is a changing in paradigm. We are trying to advance the open finance, and it's very hard to make the advancements in open finance because informational silos are a source of revenue for market participants. But in this digital era that we live on, we know that data is very valuable. Then if before people didn't care about the information that were held in the banks, now they care about information held anywhere, right? Then open finance is part of the life, and it's there to stay. And we are using this DREX platform. We are providing a trading space where you cannot avoid open finance, and where you can bring the tokenization of real world assets. That's something that we are going to be working a lot in the next couple of years. Then in this area alone, we will need to use AI, and I think that AI is very important because we want to have lots of new services provided by fintechs and startups. These fintechs and startups will have a difficult time to access the market, then there will be, we will have the need of someone that aggregates information, that knows the services on one end and know the needs of the population on the other end, so they can compose that. And I think that it is impossible for humans to do that. We need to have AI helping in this aggregation, and we are already thinking about that in the open finance framework. And what we learn there is going to be easy to transpose to the DREX framework. We have lots of things to do in DREX. That's why we're trying to go step by step. Then inside DREX, there is the need for solving and maturing the solutions for privacy. I see also two very important aspects of interoperability. One is the interoperability. We would like to have interledger composability. That would be the holy grail of the DLT space. And there are some smart people working on that. I don't think that we are quite there yet, but we are making progresses. And another thing that I think is very important is the use of verifiable credentials. Verifiable credentials to make sure that each smart contract only have access to the information that's necessary for them to run. So we reduce the leakage of information and protect the data of the citizens. I think that's very important. Once you have this objective of composing services, you're going to need lots of different credentials to run each of these services. And if you need to give the entire personal file for one smart contract so they can check, then your information is going to be all over the place. It's going to be very hard to protect your privacy. I think that in that sense, verifiable credentials are fundamental. These are the things that we need to solve in the coming years to make sure that we can collect the benefits of this technology.
Right. But Stellar just came out, actually. I think that extra layer that provided just recently, Soroban provided that extra layer for Stellar. And I think that, I'm not sure, I mean, I am assuming that offered some of the advantages you needed in your pilot program.
Yeah, the problem right now is that we are really focused on figuring the privacy. Our development team is, right. Whenever I bring anything else, they say, okay, we're going to talk about that later. In a couple of months, we can get back at that. But right now, we are finishing the first phase of the pilot, focus on privacy, and we are going to start discussing these other subjects late August or maybe in September.
Yeah, I think that one of the components, or when you talk to people about digitization and the ability to have that cross-border ease of payments and everything else, I think one of the things is always who can hack onto my bank, right? Hacking it. It's been all over the news. So I think that extra layer component of security is what would probably make your product a lot more sellable as far as services or adoption, for future adoption in your country. Just give that ease of comfort and peace of mind to the consumer. So I think, and it has to come. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, because it has to complement both the institutional and the private as an individual. So it has to conform to those two environments.
Yeah, actually, CBDCs have a lot of concerns from the public, because most of the public now are very skeptical of governments. And when you put a CBDC as the cornerstone of this platform, some people get scared. They say, okay, then the government's going to be able to see everything I'm doing, and we need to assume that yeah, it's a possibility, but that's why we are being so careful in making the use of ZKP solutions to make sure that we cannot do what we are not allowed to do. That's a very important aspect of our implementation. If it was to be a little careless about the data of individuals, we could be already making pilots of different use cases with the population, but that's not what we want. We want to make a system that is safe and that gains the trust of the population. Otherwise, it's useless.
Yeah, it is. So, I wanted to ask you, so I noticed that Brazil is implementing the CBDC program. Why is Brazil different from the other BRICS country? I mean, BRICS is a unit, it's a union of countries. B for Brazil, you're one of the first amongst the first five. Why are you taking a different course from the rest? Or why are you all trying different things? What's behind all that?
Right. I think that the CBDC's project were an opportunity for central banks to look into domestic problems. And each country, if you talk about the CBDC project, you're going to see that they are handling a domestic problem. If you take Switzerland or Hong Kong or Singapore, they are thinking about cross-border, but that's a domestic problem for them because they are a platform, a hub for international payments. Then it's part of what they do in their daily lives. And here in Brazil, what bothers us most is that we have a huge underbanked population. Even if the population is banked and they have access to payment services that are very efficient, other services as credit or investment opportunities are very hard to come by good options for the whole population. The majority of the Brazilian population only have access to one investment product. It's a savings account that was created back in 1808 and was changed the regulation 2 or 3 times since then. It's a very conservative, very simple to access, but apart from that, pretty much nobody has access to investment opportunities. And in a study that was made last year by the Association of Capital Market Participants here in Brazil, we saw that there are more Brazilians investing in crypto than in the stock market or in bonds. I know crypto is an opportunity for investment, that's fine, but it's very weird that the rest of the capital market is below that. In terms of value, we have more value invested in bonds or in the stock market. But in terms of number of participants, we have lots more participants in the crypto space. Then there is something wrong in that market. We need to make sure that people can access other investment opportunities, and digital assets are a tool for making that feasible.
Hmm. So, do you think Brazil is leading on this crypto market adoption and CBDC adoptions within Latin America? Do you think you're leading? I mean, I don't know if you follow, but Bukele also has been doing a lot with Bitcoin in his country of El Salvador, a tiny little country, has done amazing reforms politically and economically there. What
Right.
about Brazil? What do you think of that?
As I said, our focus is on a domestic matter.
Okay.
And it happens to be that this is something that can be very useful for different applications. And I really think that it's going to be very useful for Brazil to develop this infrastructure. Apart from financial inclusion, we can use this infrastructure for making Brazil another hub for international payments using crypto technology. And that's a very exciting idea. But that's not our goal. We know that that's possible, but what we want to achieve is to make it easier for the Brazilian population to access financial services. I know that when you look into the plans that we have and what we are doing, it looks a lot like we are trying to make a complete crypto ecosystem, but we need this complete crypto ecosystem to grant access to the population in a cheaper and more efficient way.
Mm-hmm. And what about the tokenization? How is Brazil dealing with tokenization, and how is the public receiving tokenization? Because it's also talk about disrupting the way that you can invest. How is that going in Brazil?
Well, actually, we had some tokenization projects here in Brazil that were faster than the law, and then we are having some problems with that. But the Central Bank of Brazil and the counterpart of SEC here in Brazil, the Securities Exchange Committee, they are working together, the Central Bank of Brazil and our exchange committee, Securities Exchange Committee, are working together to make tokenization feasible. Once we started the development of this CBDC project, the market noticed, okay, this is a platform for tokenization, then we should move forward. And the capital market that has started already some tests, they are putting pressure on us and on the Security Exchange Commission to make sure that it is possible to run tokenized projects here. And we had some sandboxes, and now we selected for the second phase of the pilot, still not with the population, but there are several different tokenization projects that we are going to follow along this second semester, and a couple others in the first semester of 2025. Then we are working together with other regulators here, and other regulators are very interested in using this technology to open up the market. Then I think that we are making some interesting progress in opening up a platform for the tokenized economy.
It seems to me that people are saying it's first you need to implement tokenization, then CBDCs. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that's a chicken and egg problem. One reinforced the other, and when we started to develop this CBDC project in Brazil, we talked to other countries that were developing tokenization projects, and one of the points that they brought up as the most important hurdles were the lack of a safe settlement tool. If they had a CBDC, their products would be much more attractive for the population, for the market, then the projects could flourish much easier.
Yeah, it sounds, now I know that Brazil is a very rich country. As an economist, what do you expect perhaps Brazil to the GDP 5 years from now? I mean, it must, because I have a feeling that all these people don't realize, I think, that the innovation advances on this whole digital CBDC tokenization, I mean, really has the potential to propel a country's economy in order to come and actually do even bigger, better projects within. So how do you see that?
Well, I think that Brazil has lots of macroeconomic problems that we need to figure out, but the potentials of the microeconomic potentials of a platform like DREX are fantastic, and market participants here in Brazil are also very clear for them that that this is a huge opportunity for Brazil. But most of the regulators take an approach based on risk only and not on opportunity. And I think that we need to try to balance those. And in this case, we have, I think we have reached a good balance between the risk and the opportunities, and the market is quite involved in this development. Everybody is excited, and if we get this right, we are going to be able to increase the GDP by a couple of points for sure in the coming years.
Good. So, Fabio, one last question then for you. Your legacy in the DREX project, what would you like it to be and what will it be?
Well, actually, what I want, I happy if that happens, is that if people manage to make their savings in a better way and use their savings for opening up credit market. The credit market here in Brazil is horrible. The interest rates are very high. Then if you have a wallet with treasury bonds or high quality assets, you can use that as a collateral for credit operations. Then it's going to reduce the cost for the population a lot. That's what I really hope that we achieve. If we achieve that, I'm more than happy. And when you think the possibilities that this bring to the economy, it seems simple, but it opens the possibility for companies to finance smaller companies in the supply chain, for the consumption of the population to increase in quality and quantity. I would be very happy with this two simple use cases, but I'm pretty sure that from there we can build a lot of new stuff in the Brazilian economy.
Well, thank you so much, Fabio. I think that is a noble idea and wish to have for the population. I think one of the things that attracted me to your project, especially your collaboration with Stellar, is the advantages that it can provide for those underbanked and unbanked populations in order for them to have a possibility in growing and empower that community in itself. So I think this is very noble. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again and continue discussing about the progress of tokenization, CBDCs, and the digitalization of Brazil. I think it's just thrilling. I really like it. So thank you very much, Fabio.
Thank you very much, Susanna. That was a very nice conversation, and I hope to be able to bring updates in the coming years. Thank you.